The holidays are a time of peace, merriment, and being together with family. That is, unless ghosts get involved in your celebration. Today we've got phantom Christmas horses, a long dead knight who enjoys festive walks in the park, and the time man's best friend saved Christmas from a ghost. All here on this very special holiday-themed episode of the Insomnia Society. The United Kingdom is no stranger to animal ghosts. They've got huge black cats that roam the woods, massive shadowy dogs that prowl the moors, and right around Christmas time, a pack of phantom horses. The story of the Phantom Riders was catalogued and told by teacher and watchmaker Hubert Bates, and comes from January 8, 1929 in the Mid-Sussex Times. The legend begins around Christmas time in the 18th century in the village of Ansty, Sussex, at an old haunted farmhouse. There's a man who wanders the bridle path, clad in dark clothing with a leather satchel. You'll see him walk up and down the path to this day, prodding at the bushes with a rake. The only problem is, he's been dead for over 100 years, and now he walks the bridle path looking for the lost deed of his house, hidden from him in a hole somewhere on the roadside. And on this same road, during the end of the Christmas season, the stampede begins. Hubert writes, "They do not appear every year, but at irregular and sometimes long intervals, and always on a moonlight night. They are said to favor a misty moon when there's a tang in the night wind and just enough frost to curdle the air into a beautiful white rime. But I'm sure the sight is anything but beautiful. The horses charge their way across the meadows of Ansty, onto the old bridle path and down Copyhold Lane onto Cuckfield Road. From here they gallop all the way to Butler's Green and the Butler's Green house. They dash through the ever-locked old gates at the estate and make for the stables in the back. They scrape against the gravel and bray and whine with a terrible otherworldly song, waiting for a stable hand to exit the loft and open the doors so that they can disappear inside. But if a stable hand fails to awaken, the horses will turn around as if frightened by something terrible and dash back through the gates and vanish down Copyhold Lane, dooming someone in the Butler greenhouse to a terrible fate before the end of the next year." Now, this is interesting because there's also a ghost in the Butler's Green house, and it's quite possible that it's connected. In the 18th century, there was a woman whose husband was a prolific gambler, a passionate, violent man who was also very jealous. One night, in a rage at the thought that his wife might be being unfaithful to him, he approached her with a knife. Fearing for the safety of her young child, she tried to protect them as the man attacked. She fled from the house with the child in her arms, her gray dress now stained red with blood. She passed through the estate's front gates, but sadly, both were found later drowned in the pond next to the lime tree terrace. No one knows if it was the lack of blood causing her to faint falling into the pond, or if the husband caught up to her, finishing what he had started. Either way, it soon became apparent that the front gates to the estate were cursed, and if anyone were to walk through them, a death would occur within the household within a year. And since then, the gates have been forever locked and a new entrance to the estate was issued. Why the horses appear during Christmas and the New Year and make their way to the stables isn't known, but this is far from the only Christmas ghost making its appearance in the UK. The medieval times in Europe were terrible. Plagues, rats, starvation, endless wars, and so much more. But some people really took a liking to it. One of these was Geoffrey de Manville from Dieppe, France. He fought alongside William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings and became one of the top 10 knights in the realm. He became Earl of Essex, and his manors included land at Barnet, South Mimms, and Monken Hadley. He was known for his ruthlessness and soon made some powerful enemies. During the War for the Crown, Geoffrey switched sides several times. This eventually led him to picking the losing side. Angered by his betrayals, the new King Stephen was going to have him executed, so Geoffrey gave up his estates and became a rebel. Taking over Ramsey Abbey, he expelled the monks who lived there, which led him to being excommunicated by the church. This was a terrible thing to have happen, because in a battle during 1144 he was slain, and because he was excommunicated from the church, his body was denied all proper burials. Only one took him, the Templar Church in London, where he was interred in a lead coffin and hung from a tree. Later, the prior of Walden Abbey was successful in getting him a posthumous pardon, and his effigy is now displayed at the New Temple Church. But sometimes, you can even see him for real during the Christmas season at East Barnet's Oakhill Park. The story starts in 1926, after a night watchman's accounts were read to the East Barnet District Councilors meeting. He had been working a detail at Oakhill Park for the current road renovations when he noticed something standing in a long military cloak by a building in the park. He observed it long enough to notice that the figure was transparent, and looking back at him through the shrouded hood was the face and body of a skeleton. It should be noted that the building this occurred at was part of the East Barnet Workhouse and was nicknamed the Shanty. Built in the 1700s, it's said to be haunted by a clanking ghost, and the ghost of the children who were lost in the underground cellar passages after being locked away as punishment. It's entirely possible this clanking ghost is no more than that of Joffrey walking around the park in his armor. That was enough for an entire town's worth of journalists to descend on the park looking for the ghost. He didn't show, but 2 years later, the East Barnet Research Society tried again by setting up members across the park. And on Christmas Eve of 1928, Sir Joffrey returned. One of the witnesses reported, a few minutes before midnight, near the old parish church at East Barnet, I saw in the distance a vague figure dressed in a heavy cloak, moving towards me from the direction of the farm home. I stood still and waited for this to approach, but suddenly it seemed to pass through a wall and disappear in the fields in the direction of Trent Barnet. So I waited and listened. I distinctly heard sounds like the clanking of spurs, but saw nothing more of the strange figure. When asked if the society would use force to rid the park of the ghost, they replied, "The purpose of the Research Society is to get into communication with the ghost quietly, and try, if possible, to find out why Sir Joffrey's spirit remains earthbound." And on Christmas Eve of 1932, there was another ghost hunt. They assembled on a bridge over Pym's Brook in East Barnet. At midnight, they began to hear the unmistakable clanking of Sir Joffrey and followed the noises southward to Monk's Firth. Before them was the specter of a headless hound, and Sir Joffrey followed, his armor glinting in the moonlight as his blood-red cape twirled with an ethereal wind. It's not certain whether the East Barnet Research Society was able to talk to Joffrey like they wanted to, but Joffrey and his headless hound are expected to make another appearance this Christmas. So if you're in the East Barnet area, make sure to keep your eye out for a medieval knight in full armor out for a walk with his headless hound. Speaking of dogs, if you want to see an entire episode devoted to our loyal canine friends fighting the paranormal, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you're notified when it comes out. Dogs are known to sense things that we as humans can't, and one of those things is supposedly ghosts. And during Christmas time, a pack of very good boys help save Christmas from a ghost. Our story actually begins in July of 1888 and comes to us from the St. Louis Globe, in the neighborhood of Carondelet, St. Louis, Missouri. The Carondelet Unions, the town's baseball team, was out practicing when Captain Dennis O'Keefe noticed an uninvited onlooker just before nightfall. Perched in a tree slightly off the field was a young woman dressed in a long flowing white nightgown. She was described as having a pretty face and long billowing chestnut hair. She was seen by almost everyone involved, and Dennis O'Keefe told the paper, "The case struck me as being remarkable. I finally asked Fred Duckett, the shortstop, who she was, and then Billy Westerman, the right fielder. Both looked at her and said they didn't know who it could be, at the same time directing at the attending of the rest and the bystanders to her. The team's pitcher, believing she was waving her hands as if she wanted to catch the ball, threw it at her. It curved high, and instead of catching it, they were shocked when it passed straight through her. The players looked at each other and ran to investigate. When they got a few feet from the tree, she disappeared in a flash and was gone. Soon later, though, the boys would have another encounter. 3 of us had gathered beneath the railroad bridge at Lowborough Avenue when suddenly she rushed right between us with a series of horrible shrieks and left a wave of chill, cold air which made us shudder, disappearing apparently in the abutments of solid masonry which the structure rests. The story of a ghost in town was verified by Deputy Sheriff Tucker. It had been seen 3 times in total, and most often appeared around 8:30 at night, following the same route every appearance. But there was more strangeness to come. Every Sunday morning at 1 a.m., the dogs in the neighborhood would begin to make strange noises. They would rush to the house of a man named Frank Strother, and from here they would run circles around his house, backwards and forwards, snapping at the air as if danger was close by. The dogs would continue to do this for over an hour as they slowly ungrouped one by one. His neighbors, who also saw the phenomenon, noticed that fewer and fewer dogs were turning up for the house run. Unannounced to them, the local sheriffs had been asked to investigate the large number of dog disappearances in the area. Sadly, they found them deceased, each one bearing the small imprint of a feminine hand where the hair had been burnt away. This continued, and the ghost came again at Christmas time. The paper writing, "The people of Carondelet are in a state of terror over the appearance of a genuine ghost. The ghost is a figure, a well-developed female with a flowing snowy white gown, sleeveless. 2 luminous eyes appear in startling relief, but yet between them, however, is a great crevice clothed in the skull is discernible, which seems to divide and spread out the upper half of the head into 2 lobes, and from which a current of bright red blood appears to flow, dyeing the white garment in irregular crimson streaks." And now, with Frank's neighbor's dog gone missing, it was only his loyal companion standing between him and the ghost. Strother and his neighbors were powerless to help that final Sunday before Christmas, as the last battle between ghost and dog echoed between the buildings. And that's where our story ends. Sadly, that's an issue with old articles sometimes, and there's no info given on why the ghost liked Frank Strother so much, or what happened to his dog. So, since it's the holiday season, we're gonna say that he was a good boy, and he fought the ghost off, and he got a lot of treats, and he got to sit by the fire on Christmas. Thank you guys so much for listening to this special holiday episode of the Insomnia Society. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and if you want to give me an early Christmas gift, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you back here soon for another episode. It gets weird out there, so stay safe, guys.